fact that's pretty much in everybody's faces right now. It's painfully obvious that things are going to get worse before they get better. I think for the most part, a sober look at the market cap right here might pretty much shatter some people's dreams, but I think that it needs to be said that realistically we're going to see, for the most part, a lot of these cryptocurrencies that I'm going to say essentially after you go through the top 200 cryptocurrencies, you enter sort of into the danger zone. Beyond the 200 spot, a lot of these different cryptos probably aren't here to stay, taking a few and of course as the exception, but for the most part, when we look at and of course perhaps even some of the cryptos in the top 200 will get eliminated. Of course, it's anybody could say, essentially, and who knows, perhaps certain cryptos will rise, and cryptocurrencies rise and fall all the time, but that's essentially one of the most I'd say sober predictions that I could make, is essentially the fact that as the space continues to move forward, we're going to see a lot of these less performing, the more poor performing projects are going to fall by the wayside. It's going to be things like blockchain and the various different technologies that are working with innovations that are going to have a real big impact as far as the future moves forward. Then when we look at the amount of movement that's been happening, Bitcoin Private is one of the top performers at the time of making this video, DEX, and I think that it's interesting always to see the technologies that are, I probably shouldn't say technology. I think it's always interesting to just see the cryptos that are on this list that are performing well in times of red across the board for the most part. And of course, privacy technologies are always going to be big. And as far as cryptocurrency is concerned, I'd say that privacy is one of the most, if not the most key variables that I think people often overlook. Stuff like Bitcoin Private, Monero, these technologies, if they go uncontested, could inevitably be key players in the future of the space. Now, when we talk about the long term of what this cryptocurrency revolution is essentially going to evolve into, we're going to see so many different cryptos. It'll be like whenever there's an internet meme, there'll be cryptocurrency that gets based around that that activity that's happening on the internet, and in a very measurable scale we'll see this sort of thing, and I'd also predict that beyond 2019, looking into the future, obviously we'd see a lot of things in the line of essentially, I think when people look back on the time that's happening and this, they'll be scratching their heads and wondering how we were using paper for anything. I think things are going to be going completely digital, and with that, it's going to require the decentralization of the storage of data and all these different things. So I think anybody who's paying attention to the current business climate and the trends that things tend to happen, and it's slow progress, surely, but at the exact same time, the technology is there, and essentially the computing power is there as well, and it's only a matter of time before we see the greater society at large ironing out a lot of these different regulations and making cryptocurrency more accessible. Now, I think this is also an interesting prognostication. Bitcoin exchange boss thinks Jeff Bezos will trigger the next bull run, and I think that this Jeff Bezos character will certainly be playing a huge role in the future of cryptocurrency, and the various different avenues that Amazon chooses to take are certainly going to move and shake the foundation of business, and it's just something that we're going to have to deal with because Amazon's such a big company. But I think that this article is definitely something interesting. I'm not going to rehash the article for you here. If you're interested, you could go check it out yourself. But I think when you look at the global trends, the fact of the matter is that one other thing that we could definitely expect to see a lot more of is decentralized exchanges, for quite obvious reasons. The fact of the matter is that the future in all aspects is decentralized if it's allowed to go across its natural progression. I think the people's choice is the decentralized, basically in all areas. And when we see these centralized components, it basically reeks of manipulation to a large extent. But I think the future of social media is going to have to employ this sort of decentralized approach if they're going to basically evolve past the problems that they've been haphazardly having to deal with as far as the current and how that essentially weighs up against the old paradigm of the way that the internet was functioning. But when we talk about things like Internet 2.0, I think that it's very hard to have a conversation about what the future of the internet is going to look like without talking about cryptocurrency to a large extent, if we're going to be honest with ourselves. And I think that to a large extent, cryptocurrency in the next year, looking forward to seeing the different developments that are going to be happening involving a lot of these various different very interesting projects. I'm interested in seeing how Cardano in particular is going to be taking the reins and moving forward. And I think in a big way, Cardano is definitely one of those projects that stands to gain a lot with the passage of time, in particular with the leveraging of the what Cardano aims to do. So perhaps it's interesting to look at one of the most famous Bitcoin predictions, and I'm going to read this for you. I know a lot of other YouTubers have referenced this, but I think that my audience should definitely be exposed to it as well. So here we go, quote unquote. This is from that Reddit post that's from the time traveler from the future, supposedly. But this is a pretty famous prediction as far as, here we go. On average, every year so far, the value of Bitcoin has increased by a factor of 10, from $0.1 in 2010 to $1 in 2011 to $10 in 2012 to $100 in 2013. From now on, there's a slight slowdown as the value increased by a factor 10 every 2 years to $1,000 in 2015 to $10,000 in 2017, $100,000 in 2019, and $1 million in 2021. From here onwards, there's no good way of expressing its value in dollars, as the dollar is no longer used, nor is any central bank issued currency from that matter. There are two main forms of wealth in today's world, land and cryptocurrency. There are just over 19 million Bitcoin known to be used in the world today, as well as a few 100,000 that were permanently lost. And we're still dealing with a population of just over 7 billion people today. On average, this means the average person owns just under 0.003 Bitcoin. However, due to the unequal distribution of wealth in my world, the mean person owns just 0.001 Bitcoin. That's right, most of you reading this today are rich. I personally live next to an annoying young man who logged into his old Reddit account 2 years ago and discovered that he received a tip of 0.01 Bitcoin back in 2013. And that's one of those old predictions, I think, that's become sort of a internet classic. But what do you guys think about that sort of thing? What do you think about the, in particular, there's a lot of interesting predictions that have been made, like the John McAfee, and all these different essentially pretty influential figures, John McAfee. There's all these people have said all these different things about what the value of Bitcoin is going to be in the future. So let us know in the future, is McAfee going to win the 2020 election by running on a cryptocurrency based platform? I mean, that definitely might get him some votes from people who like cryptocurrency. But I think the fact that McAfee is going to, at least even the fact that he's talking about running on a cryptocurrency platform is going to be very hilarious. And I think that it's going to be a great talking point as far as especially what we saw happen with the essentially all the different things that happen with the recent election and how those will certainly send a shockwave through cryptocurrency and in the future as far as regulations are concerned. A lot of interesting things happening. But yeah, when we think about the future and the fact that there is a finite amount of Bitcoin and there's not a finite amount of USD, I mean that sort of thing is definitely something to be on my radar, at least, and it certainly is something I wouldn't take for granted, because if you put some any Bitcoin in the future is going to be worth the value of Bitcoin, and that's one prediction I think is definitely going to ring true. Bitcoin dominance is climbing. People who are just starting to get interested in cryptocurrency are probably crying, and there's red all the way across the board. Certainly 2018 right now. It's definitely not 2017. You think about the difference between the current climate in cryptocurrency as opposed to what was happening December 10th of last year. Very, very different. Think about it. If you bought Bitcoin on December 10th of 2017, you would have made money if you sold it on January 7th. That's just a fact, and I doubt that people who are buying Bitcoin today will be making any money on January 7th of 2019. But then again, that's going to just have to be cataloged in this video and archived as another one of my predictions. For those of you who are watching this in the future, well, I guess you guys can go back and check the record and see if I was correct on that one. But yeah, I think that there's certainly going to be dark times ahead before things get lighter. They always say things get darkest before the dawn, and I think that cryptocurrency is no exception. But that doesn't mean that the long term doesn't look bright. I still hold true to the concept that cryptocurrency is the most important, if not like the most important thing that's happening with the internet right now, and basically the variables that are surrounding the cryptocurrency paradigm shift and the intricacies that are connected at the hip with the development, not only involving these technologies all the way across the board, but essentially what we see happen with regulations and the various different bodies of power that essentially end up winning the cryptocurrency lottery. That's going to be probably one of the key determining factors that I think people 100 years from now are going to be looking back at and essentially wondering why less people were interested in cryptocurrency than just this community that we have going for us right here. But now the difference between the last bear markets and this one is that this time we have a huge amount of alts that have survived and will thrive in the next bull market as well. They'll I think this was an interesting tweet right here, and it definitely does harken back to it makes me nostalgic for the time in the cryptocurrency space. For those of us who've been paying attention to this kind of thing for any amount of years, certainly this isn't the worst, and it's not the best. Obviously, it's just sort of a boring sideways move, I think, as far as the space goes. But that doesn't mean that things aren't going to get exciting in the future. Personally, I'm filling my bags, and that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, I mean, for those of you who are interested, you guys can also follow us on our Twitter. That's at CryptoTuber. And I think that this has been a really awesome video. I think that this has been a great opportunity for us to talk about broadly the larger implications of what's happening in the cryptocurrency space. But of course, remember, this video is for entertainment, educational purposes only. Obviously, I'm not your dad. This video is basically just so that I can explain what I think, because that's the whole point of the internet. But anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.